For half a century, WJPZ Syracuse has been the greatest media classroom on the planet.
We've trained students from the 1970s to the 2020s on how to run a professional radio station.
But the lessons learned and relationships formed go far beyond studios and transmitters.
Taking a look back through the eyes of those who experienced it.
This is WJPZ at 50.
Welcome to WJPZ at 50. I am John Jagay. Excited to be joined by one of the first marriages, possibly the first marriage to come out of the senior staff of the radio station, Rob Weingarten and Sue Mandel from the class of 85. Thank you both for being here today.
Thank you for having us.
It's great to be here because we actually get to see each other. We still spend a lot of our lives in different places.
Gotcha.
That's probably the secret to our marriage is he hasn't worked from home for years.
There you go.
Travel has been a key to our happiness.
So it was actually Phil Lecasio from the class of 84 who suggested that I reach out to you, Sue, because you guys go way back, right?
Yep. Phil and I went to high school together. He's really probably the reason why I joined the radio station, because of his influence. He was a good friend. I visited him when I was a senior in high school. I don't think I stayed with him, but he did introduce me to the radio station, and then I introduced Rob after we started being friends first.
Right.
In TCM 135, I think it was.
That's how they get you, Rob. They bring you into the radio station first, and then it goes from there, right?
Well, it's funny, too, because how Sue and I met in class was strictly because I was wearing my high school jacket. Mm-hmm. We literally grew up 10 minutes from each other, but went to rival high schools.
Wow.
So we knew a lot of the same people. We didn't know each other. She was like even showing me pictures of her high school boyfriends playing sports, and they're playing against me. I'm in the picture.
Wow.
She's like, here's my boyfriend. I'm like, oh, there's me,
Right.
Now you can pull up that picture and say, here's my boyfriend, here's my husband.
That was a little freaky.
I was already in the picture.
Quite literally. Well played, sir.
I was literally in the picture, and I'm still there, which is awesome.
I'm not sure which one of you wants to take the lead on this, but you were there as class of 85 at a really, really important time in the radio station's history. This is as the move was starting to happen to FM. Take me through the idea, as best you remember, as to how it actually happened.
It's such an incredible evolution. It's hard to really believe that a group of students was even able to pull this off. I mean, we talk about it now as history, and it comes up again banquet after banquet, and Rick Wright will tell the story and everything else. But, when Sue and I first got there, there was a dilapidated house on University Avenue with a makeshift studio and an antenna on top of Day Hall.
Right.
That had the power of a Mr. Microphone. I don't know if the Mr. Microphone was a toy you bought as a kid. You could use the microphone to come out of your own radio at home.
I had one of those, yep.
And anybody who ended up in radio probably did. That's what we started with. And then between our freshman and sophomore year, the university was doing maintenance. They tore the antenna off of the top of Day Hall, and we had nothing. We were literally the background noise on the cable information channel for university television. It was the only place you could hear us. I think that's the real testament to everybody who was on Sue's staff doing news, my staff doing sports, and the entire music staff, because you were literally doing it for nobody. It was absolute practice.
Right.
And, Bob Flint and Mark Humble and Eric Fitch through Chris Mossman, it's a 2.5 year process, really starts that process of acquiring the FM signal. I still can't believe we pulled it off.
Sue, anything to add to that?
No, I agree with everything. I mean, the house that we started out with was probably not safe for us to even be broadcasting from.
But you had the racks as an audience. Even if nobody was listening, you knew there were rodents listening to you perform. So there was always something.
And, we would go there in the middle of the night. When you think about it now, I wouldn't let my kid go there. And we did. And we showed up and we broadcasted. And it was really a practice. That's exactly what it was. Learning how to do.
Do we have that picture of me with a Daily Orange walking to the house when there was about 30 inches of snow outside?
Right.
And I was still going to show up to do my sportscast. And I look worse than an Eskimo. 18 below outside. But that's what we did. For the longest time, we were performing it for nobody. And then all of a sudden, we really had an audience. It was incredible.
The move to FM, you started the studio. That was when you moved to Watson, right?
Yeah. We had moved into Watson Theater and started broadcasting from there a little bit prior to getting on FM.
Okay.
So we had the nice studios. And then the FM signal came along just a little bit after. When we got the Watson studios, they were a blessing. And what Fitch and his team were able to do and build for us there is actually nicer than some of the first places I worked.
Definitely.
I think that's true for many of us that worked in radio.
When I got to my first radio station and the board was actually older. and more dilapidated than what I was used to. It was like, wow,
Yeah.
we had it really good there by the time we wrapped up.
And I got to imagine, Sue, your new staff probably expanded pretty vastly when you've had some real dedicated people in the old place, and now you've got this brand new place, and you're on FM. Then people must have wanted to come out of the woodwork to be on the air.
It's funny because I remember like recruiting people. I was an RA. I recruited the kids on my floor. Constantly be recruiting. You in Newhouse? Are you interested in news? One of my favorite people was part of my floor and just met great people and recruited them, and they became dedicated people. Jennifer London was one of the people on my staff. She's at NPR now. Tori Ekstrand was on my staff. Julie Arviden. Everybody has been in all kind of facets of broadcasting over the years, and it's stuck with them.
So how did you two go from being friends to more than friends? They're both nervously laughing and looking at each other.
I thought he was cute.
She took these really great notes in class, and I had a history of sleeping in class. I really needed her. I had a class prior to TCM 135 with somebody else who Sue knew. So I'd walk over to the class with this guy, Greg, and we ended up sitting with Sue. And then one day after class, I throw the jacket on, and then we start being friends. And then eventually I asked her out. It wasn't that long. I mean, it was in the fall of our freshman year. It was October 18th.
16th. Who's counting?
I inscribed that date on the inside of my wedding band so I wouldn't forget it. University Union was showing no nukes, and I never miss a Springsteen event, so we've been together ever since.
That's fantastic. Married how long and kids?
Well,
Take Rachel's age. Oh, you don't get Rachel's age right either half the time. But take Rachel's age and add 10. It'll be our 35th anniversary in May.
right. And we have two kids. We have a son who's 28 and a daughter who is 24.
Excellent. So tell me about each of your career paths since graduation for those of the alumni who don't know you.
I quickly realized that he was more talented than I was.
And she is so wrong about that. She was such a good hair talent. Phil will tell you that. Anybody will tell you that. She could have been on a Today Show without the scandals.
I didn't love it enough to cover community events and be up in the middle of the night, 2 a.m. And I just felt like, if we were going to travel, we were going to be together, it would be for him.
Okay.
I decided to just get into the business side of the business. And in college, I started interning at an ad agency. And then eventually my path took me through different ad agencies, supervisor, and then I went into sales in 92 because he got a job in DC and I needed to move from New York. And the only thing I felt like would be comparable was a sales position. So I started selling advertising, and that's what I've been doing ever since. Now I'm at a TV station. I'm the national sales manager for a station in Shreveport, Louisiana, working remotely out of my home.
Wow. And Rob?
Okay, long sorted career through radio and 10 other careers too. Let's see how I can shorten this up for you. So after we graduate, I'm hell-bent on being a sportscaster. So of course, the first job I got was doing news.
Yes.
First radio station was 107.1 in New York, Howard Stern's old station, WRNW, which had just switched the call signs over to WZFM. Moved out of the dilapidated house in the Private Parts movie into an equally barren studio that was on top of a bank in Pleasantville, New York.
All right.
So I started there as a newscaster, moved to their morning show to do sports, and then got to go to their night show, and I was the night DJ from the 7 to midnights for about a year. And that's all JPZ right there.
Yeah.
Because I did news at JPC for Sue occasionally. So I was ready to do any job in radio anyway. And this particular radio station, I got to do all of that. They bumped me up to operations manager, but while I was there, I started board opping weekends at WFAN because I was still hell-bent on being a sportscaster.
Sure.
That's who I was.
That's where you want to be, is WFAN.
Right. And this is the very early days of WFAN. So I'm working there. I think I got to be on the air like twice. I'm working my way up, doing some weekend producing. I'm having a great time. And this is the real early days of sports radio. So it's pioneering stuff. It's never been done before.
Right.
We could literally do whatever we wanted. And I got to work with guys who would go on to become legends. So it was great. But while I was there, a couple of the people who were part of the FAN family went to Washington, D.C. to start WTEN, which was the first sports station in Washington. And I think at that time became the third or fourth 24-hour sports talker to go on the air. And I went in there as a producer and board op, and within 3 weeks was the overnight talent.
Wow.
So I was the overnight talent there for about 2 years. And then, of course, they realized they were spending way too much money, and I was part of the wipeout of half the staff.
Some things never change.
Some things never changed, but fortunate things happen. I picked up a gig writing television news for a few months, and while that was happening, got the opportunity to go to Tampa to program a sports radio station that was rivaling a more established brand in town. And I went down there, took over the afternoon drive, took over the radio station, and we did real well with which was 820 The Team in Tampa. And then lo and behold, Clear Channel and Paxson Communications, who owned us, merged, forming a 16-station cluster. 8 stations had to get axed out, and I woke up out of a job.
Yeah.
One of the great things of all time, because we had won all the battles, and we still somehow ended up losing the war.
That's radio for you.
Yeah, it's radio. It was a great run there. That was when Sue said, well, you can go do whatever you want. We are never moving again.
You fell in love with Tampa.
I love it here.
Ah, okay.
Not necessarily, but I fell in love with, having my kids have a stable place to live, doctors. I had my job. Back then, people didn't work remotely like they do now. Have your fun, but I'm not moving.
So now my options become a little bit limited, but I actually I got hired by Big League Broadcasting to program 790 The Zone in Atlanta. And I went and did that for a couple of years, and that was great. They let me travel. Then they bought 590 KFNS in St. Louis. And they said, well, you're already getting on an airplane. It doesn't really matter where you go. Go program that one. So I programmed KFNS for a while. And then after about a year and a half of that, it was time to come home and see my kids.
That's fair. That's fair.
And I was kind of tiring of radio at the time. I had some good opportunities to go on to other markets, but that was done. And I did a bunch of other things, but for the last 15 years, discovered that I have a knack for selling stuff on television.
Ha.
Been doing shopping's television for 15 years on boutique channels, and that's now almost as long as my sports career.
So you're selling specific items for specific companies, or you're working for the networks? Can you paint that better picture for me?
The channel I'm with now is called Gem Shopping Network, and we just sell premium luxury jewelry to a very wealthy clientele. I can't believe I'm doing this for a living. I can't believe I'm actually good at it. It's a really successful place, and it's been a great way to apply what I learned.
Yeah.
People always say, well, why are you good at this? I said, because if you're a good talk show host and you can tell a good story, you can pitch anything. You can sound like an expert on anything. So people think I know what I'm talking about, and I managed to sell some stuff.
You mentioned doing news, sports on air, and then doing that in your radio career. I'll ask the both of you, what skills or lessons did you learn at the station that have served you well in your time since getting out of Syracuse?
I didn't work with the sales staff at the radio station, but I've been doing that now for 30 years. I just, learned to really pitch things and make nice to people and just get people excited and interested in something that I have to offer, which is kind of what we did at this radio station. We pitched what we were programming, some of the events that we used to do, like dance marathon and special events like that. How about you?
Yeah, Rob, you want to jump in here? Anything else you haven't mentioned yet?
For me especially, it all comes back to the sports side. I was playing lacrosse at the same time I was at Z89.
Yeah.
I'm a team guy. I was always a team sports player. As I've gotten older, I've gotten into golf and stuff, but when I was younger, I was never into individual sports. It was always about the team. I always wanted to be in a team environment, and there was no better team than the entire team at Z89.
That is true.
And my team within the team, the sports department, just some incredibly great guys. And we got to do so many great things. And that team concept that we all had there in pre-corporate radio, that team concept was at every radio station you went to, because you had a full staff that did everything. And I think one of the reasons I'm out of it now is because I never really adjusted well to the corporate culture, the corporate pods, all the syndication, 8 people running 8 stations. That didn't feel to me the same way that it did in the radio environment that I started in. Z89 was the perfect prep ground to get into radio when we got into radio. But radio is a much different landscape now. And I know that Z89 is preparing people for that as opposed to what Sue and I came out in, because it was just a completely different universe.
And you felt like a family. We had the news staff worked well with the on-air talent and the sports department. I remember being part of the Crazy Morning Crew and Dave Dwyer calling me the queen of ad-lib.
That may be been a little sarcastic.
That was very sarcastic, but I loved it. I mean, we were just like buds, friends, and, it didn't matter that you got up at the crack of dawn to go to the radio station. It was just something you all worked together. And I can remember senior staff meetings where we were like hacking out over the senior staff for the following year. 2, 3 in the morning.
Sure.
There was always certain rivalries with WAER, but particularly for news and sports, because that were the two departments where both stations had a full presence. And sure, a lot of the AER guys got to go on and be Sean McDonough, but they were so jealous of what we did on the crazy morning crew and how much fun we had and what we could get away with. And they were always asking me, can I do a couple of those? Because we were having such a good time. I've always felt better as a rebel and an upstart. And that's who we were, and that's what we did. That's why the whole thing about getting on FM is just such a great feeling to be able to pull that off. And for us to be able to do that at the time where the university took WAER over and just made them into a corporate public broadcasting station,
right?
There's no richer or better feeling.
And that's the decade before the Telecom Act happened in 96. It's funny to me because these themes keep coming up in the podcast. We're almost 50 episodes of interviews recorded in the podcast now already. And so many of these themes...
Oh, so we were way down the list, huh?
It was chronologically whenever I could book you guys, but plenty more to come. There are so many themes that just keep coming up over and over again, whether you graduated in 75, 85, 95, 2005, 2015, or you're going to graduate in 2025. And that is the family of JPZ and that pull of when you first walk into that radio station and how you felt. And yeah, you make a really good point, Rob. Sean McDonough, never heard of him. No, but Sean McDonough is some guy. WAER had all these big names and prestige. You look on the walls and all the framed pictures at Newhouse. This podcast has shown not only have a number of JPZ folks, present company included, gone on to great things, but we had fun doing it. There was that dichotomy of personality, and some people worked at both, and it worked out for them. For me, before I was even cleared to do a sportscast on the air at WAER, I was the chief announcer in charge of all the jocks at Z89. Those were my people. That was the fun. That was the family that I found at Syracuse. And you hear these stories repeated throughout the generations. They echo of this atmosphere and this amazing place that is JPZ. Any folks that we haven't mentioned yet that come to mind that you've made friends with and stayed in touch with over the years? Either one of you?
Oh, yeah. So many.
I mean, tons. I mean, for us especially, I mean, we live about 30 minutes from the Mossmans.
Okay.
Chris has been incredibly close to both of us, but particularly me forever. And now we still go to concerts together. And the difference is instead of tailgating and getting high before the show, we now catch the early bird together in Florida. And after an early bird dinner, we go see some act that's now 75 years old, but we're still loving it.
Old country buffet for the win.
Yeah, always. But, it's great to still have them around.
And my best friend is somebody I recruited to work at the radio station who she's still my best friend to this day. So many people I have from Facebook. We have the Z89 people. We have the college people, high school people, but so many.
Volkov only lives an hour from us, and if he ever gets off the cruise ship, we're going to get together. He's always on vacation.
And we started the Alumni Association in our apartment in Scarsdale.
There you go.
That's right. We did do that.
Yep.
We don't participate in the Alumni Association anymore, but we were there at the beginning of it.
Love it. Tampa's kind of nice this time of year, but why wouldn't you want to come to Syracuse in March?
Yeah, first week in March when it always snowed.
The last time we did a banquet, who was inducted that year? It's about 5-6 years ago. The banquet is starting when we get the phone calls that our flights to Florida are already canceled because of a snowstorm in Syracuse. We had to spend the entire banquet trying to rebook our flights because we both needed to get out of there for work, and our daughter had a final.
Oh, geez.
Syracuse in March.
I remember that year because my now wife came as my girlfriend. And that's, by the way, unlike you guys who met at Syracuse, when you bring a significant other to the banquet, it's serious. It's probably going somewhere. So the first year that I brought her was that year. Banquet starts. Your phone is ringing. Oh, it's US Air. Oh, no. This is how I knew she was a keeper. She said, here, give me your phone. I'll give you my phone. I'm going to go up to the hotel room. I'll wait on hold with US Air for 2 hours so you don't miss the banquet and get to see all your friends. I'm like, you are a keeper.
Oh, that's great.
And I'm sitting there like, I just started a new gig. I got to be on the air tomorrow night. We got to go make this flight work. It was still a great weekend. Even the people who we're not close with anymore and just connected with through Facebook, whether it's, Bob Flint, Mark Humble, Mary Mancini, they still feel like family. And when we see each other, no time has gone by.
Yeah, always.
Although when Sue and I walk into the banquet, everybody turns heads and goes, I can't believe she's still with him. She's still there. How'd she do it?
God willing, that'll be my wife and I in a few years. Before I let the two of you go, and thank you so much for coming on today, any other funny stories you remember from your time at the station that we haven't covered in a half an hour or so here?
There's tons. I know you talked with Chris and Phil and Bob about me being the guy out there driving around trying to see how far the signal went.
Were you going north or south?
I had the north run. I had the longer night. I put the car on 81 and I just started heading north. And of course, we didn't have cell phones, so I had to find pay phones to call Chris and say, still got it. Still got it. All right, I'm up here in Fayetteville. It's a little spotty. We had an ulterior motive for that. We were trying to secure the rights to the Syracuse Chiefs.
Okay.
Because WAER had lost them when they went public broadcasting and AAA baseball. This was the holy grail. We were trying to prove to them that we had a viable signal, but unfortunately the timing just didn't work out. We couldn't get the station on the air in time. And that was one play-by-play opportunity we lost. We always found ways to get play-by-play on the air. I mean, it blows me away that right now the Syracuse women's basketball coach is Felisha Legette, and we did her high school games at Nottingham High School.
No kidding.
Yeah, because we would do anything to do play-by-play. So when they offered us the opportunity to do some girls' high school basketball, we ran out and we did it. And it was her, and she was great then. And then she came to Syracuse, and we ended up, while she was a player at Syracuse, securing the rights to Orange women's basketball because WAER didn't want it. You know, she became the star player at Syracuse, led him to the NCAAs for the first time. And now she's the coach. So I just think that's really cool.
Really cool full circle story. Sue, anything that pops to mind for you, whether it was being on the Crazy Morning Crew or anything else that from behind the scenes?
Well, I loved the Z89 C word of the day. That was like my favorite. It's funny because Rob and I were talking last night, and I was thinking about the stories that we covered. We started covering the AIDS crisis. And then there was this Grand Slam breakfast murder that happened in Syracuse.
Whoa.
Where a woman went to Denny's and ordered a Grand Slam breakfast, and that was the big news story of the year.
Hang on. I need to know more about this. So she got whacked while she was having her Grand Slam breakfast?
No, she whacked her husband after having a Denny's Grand Slam breakfast. And that was the big trial.
So she had the breakfast, then killed him, didn't kill him, then celebrated at Denny's.
I think it killed him and then went to Denny's afterwards.
This is why I've never gone to Denny's, ever.
Should have gone with the moons over my hammy.
Yeah, I remember we went to find out what this Grand Slam breakfast was all about.
I won't order a Grand Slam breakfast for that reason.
It was a great training ground. It really was. And a lot of my staff went on to be in news, unlike myself.
It is interesting when you think about the big news stories that coincided with different generations of Z89 and JPZ folks. You had the AIDS epidemic.
Right.
Not long after you graduated, unfortunately, was Pan Am 103.
Exactly. It was 2 years after we graduated.
You had to report that they were raising the legal drinking age in New York to 21. We were the last ones to come in with an 18-year-old drinking age.
Oh, wow.
That's true.
It was our senior year that it shifted to 21.
And you guys are like, so long, suckers.
Well, no.
Exactly.
Forced the university to close the Jabberwocky, which was probably the best bar and club for music in Syracuse, because the university decided we shouldn't be in the student-run bar business if the students can't drink.
Right.
So the Jabberwocky, we blew all of the money they had in the promotional account. We got James Brown to play the last night, which is probably the greatest night of my life.
Wow.
It hit a club that fit about 500 people if you stuffed it. James Brown closed it out.
That is incredible.
A number of us used to go there for happy hour after our shift.
And oldies night.
Yep.
Because it was literally right across the courtyard from Watson Theater.
Was it real? Oh, wow.
I remember sharing many a drink with Phil Licasio there, and even Mark Humboldt.
And it only took one Jabberwocky drink, which was a very healthy cocktail, to knock both Sue and Phil out. Neither one of them could hold much liquor. The Jabberwocky did them solid.
The names change. Some of the stories stay the same. For my class in 02, it was Darwin's, and it was a drink they called the Electric Gatorade. Same idea.
Oh.
With stiff drinks and James Brown, that is a great place to leave it. Sue Mandel and Rob Weingarten from the class of 85, one of the first, maybe the first, great love story in the history of WJPZ. Thank you both so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having us.
It was great. Thank you.
The WJPZ at 50 podcast is created entirely by the staff and alumni of the world's greatest media classroom.
It's hosted by John Jag Gay, class of 2002. Editing help from James Bames Grundy III, class of 2020.
Imaging by Maureen Cooper, class of 1999.
And Ed Lacombe, class of 1985.
Podcast artwork by Marty Dundix, class of 2001.
Follow WJPZ at 50 on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube,
or wherever you're listening right now.